Good morning from Bosham, here in Sussex on an early October day where the sky is a bit cloudy, a little bit damp in the air. I'm here with Simon Bradford of Salesforce, who knows the area extremely well. And Simon, delighted to be here today.
Pleasure.
And here we are. Is it Bosham Harbour we're in,
yes,
or is it Chichester Harbour?
No, this is Bosham Harbour, which, I mean, the village here is Bosham. This feeds off what is effectively Chichester Harbour, so the waterway here is known as Chichester Harbour, which is a beautiful spot, as you can see, and hopefully we'll take in a bit of the picturesque scenery as we come through.
Really looking forward to this, and sort of the latest stretch of the Policing Friendship Tour. And let's just have a little scan round of the camera as we speak. So there's a boathouse just there. It looks sort of lifeboaty in a way, but perhaps it isn't. So loads of yachts, some sort of crane that we're going to walk past in a second or two.
Sailing club is right here.
This is the sailing club, is it? The with the tent, and then a church just hidden behind a little bit of few trees there and woodland, and then the harbour itself. And this is what we're going to walk along. Heading towards a crane, which seems to be the boat on it.
It's lively here this morning.
Seems to be discharging some sort of. Anyway, we'll see how we go. Salesforce, Simon.
Yeah.
A company I feel I know pretty well, but not one that is that well known. I think certainly in UK policing, maybe we're better known to some of those in policing elsewhere in the world.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit to start with about Salesforce, if you would.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. So look, Salesforce, well, look, it's an American-based software company. It's probably one of the bigger names that people, don't know about, as you rightly say. I mean, it's about 65,000 employees now. It's one of the fastest-growing software companies ever. And all those good things. It has a market cap of 250 billion. So it's big, and it's very ambitious in terms of what it wants to do, like most of these companies are. But that's really not going to cut it if I was to go into public sector and say, oh, we're big and special. So actually what Salesforce is really trying to do at the moment is to...
Let's just get past this. A little bit of cleaning going on. Getting the barnacles off the boat. There's an application there in policing, and getting the things that slow you down off the boat. Anyway, I interrupted you. Hopefully we can hear better now.
Yeah, that might be slightly better. So look, Salesforce. Look, we're trying to build this brand into policing and into public sector in general. And that's really where I'm sort of focused. It's around building an industry relevant point of view. I don't want to, it's a big software company, it's a big portfolio. I don't want to be everything to everyone. I actually want to come with a very specific message and actually say, look, this is where we can be disruptive and add value to the police market in particular.
The way in which I and Policing Insight first came into contact with Salesforce, we, Policing Insight, and our parent company Copac had put together a report on contact management a couple of years ago, looking at collecting data from UK forces on contact management. Published that, and that's still available on the Policing Insight website. Quick plug there. It's subsequently you and a colleague of yours, Steve Norris, got back to us and said, well, look, there's an opportunity to take this further, this report, and look in more detail at future police contact management. We liaised about 18 months ago, and that in due course led to the Copac report on future police contact management, sort of looking at demand analysis and how that might be taken forward. So it's an area that elsewhere in the world pretty darn well, and indeed here in the UK in different sectors pretty darn well. So Salesforce has something to offer UK policing in this area.
Yeah, very much so. I suppose if you look at the heritage of where Salesforce has come from, and the name would probably imply it, right? You know, it was based for looking at sales and sort of relationship management and guiding people through a sales sort of process, but it very much lends itself to service. And what we would look at, especially with kind of, you know, the call center, and thinking about how do we move away from, say, you know, being very incident specific and looking at an incident, to actually looking at, say, the citizen, and being citizen-centric. And that very much is giving us this, what we would call a 360-degree view of the citizen. So if someone is contacting us, and by the way, contact could be, you know, we have the traditional means, right? You could come into the police station, so it could be face-to-face, could be over the phone, could be by email. But increasingly, there is this omni-channel approach, which is, I may come through a form of social media. You know, it could be a TikTok video.
It's a myriad of contacts now.
Exactly.
It isn't just the calling in at the front desk or on the telephone. It could be 101 or 999,
Absolutely.
or it could be through Twitter, or it's a whole myriad of ways into policing. And the need for policing to join all that up and make sure that Officer A handing over to Officer B in the most simplistic form, that Officer B understands everything that Officer A might have initiated or dealt with on the case.
Absolutely, and we want to have in that contact centre, again, not just a view of the incident that's been reported, but we want to have a view of that whole person, right? What has been their history, you know, of contacting the force, or, you know, putting things on social media, making comments, coming through. Is there a case of, say, you know, vulnerability here that we need to pick out? So what might look like a very trivial matter actually might be something that actually we need to escalate up. So the call centre of the future, and what we would sort of look at as this citizen-centric approach, is really about trying to get a more complete picture. And I think, you know, policing has been trying to do that for a while, and it's not just policing, you know, local government and other areas. It's about actually, how do I get this full view? And again, if I go back to the original analogy, you know, as a sales company, as a, you know, if you're an Amazon of the world, you know, you're constantly getting targeted because they know what your preferences are, they know your history. And that would, you know, why can't we apply that same sort of logic and service to citizens who are coming into the contact centre or trying to reach out to us?
In the policing context, there is the National Police Chiefs Council National Contact Management Strategy, an area led for the National Police Chiefs Council by ACC Alan Todd of Police Service for Northern Ireland, and that strategy encompasses, or has, three key elements within it. That contact be public focused, that the contact be that represent effective channel management, and that there be prioritisation of content in there. Elements of which you've already referred to. Tell me a little more about the channel management side. So fascinating for me that there are so many different ways into policing, but how do you provide a service that supports not just the, at one end, the 999 and 101, but actually integrates through to those other social media aspects?
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. So and again, look, that's a huge. You suddenly think of the channels you've suddenly got now coming into a force. I mean, it's absolutely hugely increased. So one of the first things we would look at there is actually you need to reduce some of the noise, because you're gonna, you know, if you're following social channels or you're monitoring keywords or things like this to look for activity, you know, you somehow need to sort of funnel that down. So again, a lot of the tooling that we would have is actually to identify, you know, what is real versus what is maybe just something that's being republished, or a news agency that's, you know, pushing something out again. So actually there it's trying to find, you know, the real source of the truth. So I guess that sort of public first phase in is, and it may not be that they're deliberately reaching out to a force, but they may be commenting on something that you want to look at, you know, knife crime or whatever, you know, something of that description. So again, I think from the people-centric piece, it's really about how do we look at all those feeds coming in, look at all that information, funnel it down so we can actually then have something that is actionable, and work out where do we need to go and make an intervention, or raise a case, or do what we might need to do.
One of the ways in which policing indicates just how key an area this is actually in the National Police Chiefs Council has two relevant portfolio leads. So not only Alan Todd, portfolio lead for contact management, but also Simon Cole, the Chief Constable at Leicestershire, who leads on digital public contact. So that's in itself a reflection that it's a pretty darn complex area, and a whole myriad of
and it's not going to go away, right? So this is something we collectively, I think, need to challenge. I mean, and look, it's not just coming in as well. The forces also want to publish information out. So again, how do you make sense of that? How do you do that in an appropriate manner, and something that's auditable, can be tracked, go through the correct approvals processes, etc. So again, if you're a reporter, if you want to push information out to the public about an incident or a road closure, whatever it might be, again, there needs to be a clear strategy and way of doing that as well.
You've worked not just at Salesforce but with other companies too, in the public arena and in policing for quite a number of years now. You will recognise therefore that UK policing, the stakeholders in it's a pretty complex picture, just as we just need to watch our step here a little, because this now is beginning to look.
Luckily, it's low tide.
Well, exactly. I was just thinking that
high tide, this would be a slightly different walk.
This isn't smell-o-vision, but there is the distinct aroma here of the sea, salt of. Again, let's just watch our footing just here. I'll let you. Yeah, I have walking boots on. I'm not sure. Yes, you have walking boots on too. So it is a complex area, and it's also the stakeholders include, for example, the Police Digital Service, formerly the Police ICT company, now PDS, which also relatively recently published a social media management engagement framework. So there's a lot of elements here. How do you and your team go about engaging with just the number of stakeholders that there are, and presumably hoping in due course, definitely hoping in due course to persuade them of the merits of Salesforce.
Of our wares, yes. Well, the framework you've just described is absolutely fundamental. So the work with Ian Bell and PDS team, we are on that framework, and that's actually, if I look at coming into this market, and if we looked at momentum and quick wins, if you like, or early wins, getting on the framework is absolutely one of those for us. So that social engagement framework really, actually, that encompasses a lot of what I've just been talking about in terms of that citizen-centric approach, the call centre, how we handle different channels. A lot of that is within that social engagement framework. You can take a more sort of vanilla approach to that if you wanted to, but actually if you've got a strategy which is around the concepts I've kind of just discussed, moving away from the incident to a more citizen-centric view, then absolutely that framework is a way to enable that. And so for us, that's really our, like I said, that has been a great win for us to be on that framework.
We're just approaching what appears to be a reasonably quiet country road here, but we may just need to step aside from time to time as the if there's any cars.
A great view back across the sort of inlet here to the you can see the church there and the harbour town.
Just in the distance there, the crane that we walked past right at the very start, and at low tide you were suggesting earlier on. So this is. The water's yet to come up.
Speaking of tides, this is meant to be a very famous spot. So this is allegedly the area where King Canute actually tried to stop the tides.
Really?
So talking about tides, this is allegedly the inlet where actually King Canute sat and said he could command the tides.
I didn't know that was a treat of this particular walk, this journey. So. Completely a first for me, and fascinating to.
It's an old Roman village. Chichester is about 2 kilometres away, which was a big Roman settlement and city. So as you can imagine, as a waterway up here for goods, etc., that's where Bosham really kind of grew up. and started from. So yeah.
Just before we return to the business side, again before we started, I was admiring the yachts, lamenting my inability on anything to do with the water, or craft on the water, sailing or such like. And you told me that though you've lived for much of your life, born in the Chichester area,
Yeah.
I think, travelled during work to the States and elsewhere, but you know, you are a lad and a man of this area,
Yes.
and yet you can't sail.
You're giving my secrets away here.
Oh,
Yeah, do you know what? I get asked this question all the time when I say to people, where do I live? And I say, oh, I live in Chichester. They say, oh, you must sail, and I sort of look at them with a slight sort of disappoint on my face and say, oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually, the disappointment's more on their faces, I think. But I say, yeah, I never got into sailing. I don't know. I mean, I can say I probably count on one hand the amount of times I've been out sailing.
well, maybe if and when I return in 5 years' time, by then you might we might be able to take a small boat out.
I did take my power boating course recently, so I might get more into the power boating.
Well, that's also promising.
Yeah.
Just car just approaching, so we'll move to one side. But so. Right at the start again, you were telling me more about Salesforce and 4 key areas that Salesforce focuses on, and we've rather touched on 2 of those. So the citizen engagement side, which is at the heart of the policing strategy here in England and Wales on contact management. Also, we've touched on, but I would like us to expand on in a second, the you called interoperability.
Yep.
And then 2 other areas, the HR side and the sustainability side, which I think we'll cover towards the end.
Yeah.
The interop side, that's an area where Salesforce has been doing some work with policing here in England and Wales.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a bit of a perennial problem, I think, not just in policing, public sector, full stop. And it's, we have lots of systems, some that are very good at what they do, but actually when we start to look at the bigger picture and sort of broader outcomes now, it's very difficult to join those things up. So what we would look at interoperability is actually saying, well, how do we, use those systems of record that exist, but actually connect them up to some degree, and that's using things like open APIs and some of our technology to do that, which again these are not new concepts, but I think the way that we can do them now is to make that quite easy and cost effective. So one of the projects you just touched on there is single online home. So again, the example would be if I was to raise an incident via single online home, how does that connect with my local records management system back at Force? So again, we can collect that data and pass it through to the records management system. That program is in its alpha phase at the moment with Essex, so that is connecting to Athena and Connect.
So 2 of the key systems that there are here in England and Wales. In the UK, there are a number of competing records management systems.
Yeah, and that's the first one of that. We will do separate ones or second, third waves with the other vendors, of course.
Yes.
But the idea there is that you've got a number of forces that are using those systems. We create that connector once, and of course we can use it many times.
Yes.
So again, what I was saying earlier, the ability to do that, relatively quickly and cost effectively is what I think the game has changed. And that's what we want to do. We want to join up those systems. We're working with a number of suppliers at the moment. And this is also part of the story. We don't want to, at Salesforce, we don't want to be a records management company, with a specific application for records management or control room or whatever it might be. But what we want to do is actually work with those existing incumbent vendors, give them a bit more innovation, maybe a slightly different front end to their tools, and connect up those various things to give people that ability to reduce duplication of effort.
So agnostic to existing systems, different existing systems, the ability to plug into and connect those different systems, avoiding the data silo.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
hopefully
Yeah, absolutely.
helping to avoid the entering the same data multiple times.
So this concept of like swivel chairing and putting the data in and multiple systems you log into. Good example that we talked about earlier. Citizen might come through for a social channel. It might be something we need to urgently raise. We may look at the history of that individual and say, actually, there's probably someone who's quite vulnerable here. We might need to get someone out to them. Well, that connection through to the the CAD system to dispatch someone,
Computer-aided dispatch, yes.
Computer-aided dispatch, yes. That connection through to the control room to get a dispatch out there, that we have seamlessly done with a couple of providers at the moment, and that's kind of the future. That one button straight through to the control room, can see things like the Thrive score, which is kind of the severity of the case, where we can again put some intelligence around it because we've got a bigger view of the citizen now. So we can then say, right, we urgently need to dispatch someone because we've got a vulnerable female or whatever the case may be. And that's what we would look at Interop, is bringing those systems together, making it, and again, I'm making it sound quite trivial. And actually at the front end, it looks quite trivial because it literally is hitting a button. But that's the beauty about it, right? It looks simple, it's easy for the officers to do that. And that's what that Interop is, it's joining those systems up.
So, and at one level, that is nice to have, even desirable to have. At another end of the spectrum, it's absolutely, in policing terms, business critical. So the difference being, at one end, the softer end, if I can describe it as that, making sure that the citizen has a joined up, seamless service. And at the other end, it's making sure, for example, that if you've got an incident at a particular property and the officer in the control room, the member of staff perhaps in the control room, needs to let the officers at the incident know whether, for example, there is some firearms stored on the property. That is then getting much more towards the business, or rather the safety critical end of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so that is of those four key Salesforce pillars, if you like. Two dealt with citizen engagement and just now Interop. The HR side, the recruitment side.
Yeah, this is one that fascinates me. So we all know about the drive to get the 20,000 extra police officers, and we all know that number is slightly higher once you take into account people that are leaving the force for whatever reason, that might be retirements, etc. So I had the pleasure of meeting a number of PCCs recently.
Police and crime commissioners.
Commissioners in the UK. Yeah, and most of them gave the impression that actually there wasn't too much of a challenge around the number of applicants. That's still pretty healthy actually, and I think in the UK we've seen a pretty good surge around applications, maybe because of COVID, and actually the police force is a good stable job to come into, so I think we have seen a surge. The challenge was still around diversity of those applications coming through, and how do we get more diverse candidates coming in, and also how do we get maybe that next generation. So as we start to think about how forces might change, if we're trying to attract, say, technical cyber experts and things like that, well, how do we get the police force to be up front of a company I want to go and work for, or force I want to go and work for, versus say a Google that might be coming in and saying we want to take those best talent away. So the HR space is really interesting. I would also look at some of the work we've done with the Department of Defense in the US, where we run all of the Veteran Affairs program. So yes, I think there's a piece through recruitment, and again, everything like application forms. How do we make that easier? How do we have a very, what we would call, high touch with people coming through a recruitment process? So constantly reaching out to them, guiding them, making it feel like a very one-to-one personal journey, that the force really cares, so you make it much more interactive. And then all the way through people's careers, training, career transition pathways, and then ultimately into when you become a veteran as well. And this is again in the US, where we've done lots of work with the military, and that's around how do I keep touch of that that alumni, if you like. University's been doing this for years, right, looking after the sort of alumni, but in the vets, it's like, how do I provide one place where someone can go to get their information on their pension, to get help for training, or maybe it's another need around mental health or something like that, or sports clubs that they may have been,
So to what extent is Salesforce there simply to provide the IT system? To what extent does Salesforce support on the business change, the change to the processes that may be appropriate in supporting the sorts of activities that you're describing there?
Yeah, and again, so that would be a change in processes, right? Because you're not just looking at, say, let's go back to the recruiting one. It's not just job fairs and, traditional print media now. We're actually thinking about, well, how do I do a social campaign targeted at that specific audience that is, younger, mobile first? That is going to take a different model. And absolutely, we are working with, say, a number of recruitment companies to do that, and they're obviously adopting new ways of working as well. So the business process change does need thinking about. It's not just the IT tools. I absolutely agree with that. We have the platform, but there does need to be a bit of change around.
And you can support on that side as well?
Yeah, very much so. And that would be working in collaboration with our partners, some of the recruitment firms I've sort of mentioned. Yep. We have some sort of smaller niche partners as well that we work with. But it does need a bit of process change as well, and how you measure the effectiveness. If you're doing a social campaign versus go stand at a university and a job fairs day, you're going to get a number of applicants there, and then the social one may be softer touch, and actually is through, you're actually having these, like, say, multiple touch points on, with someone for a duration of 6-12 months to sort of get them used to the idea that actually this might be a profession I want to go into.
So then the final pillar, sustainability, and let's just pause here for a moment, because I think the sustainability pillar, here we are in such a beautiful environment where at high tide the tide would be maybe 3 feet, a meter. It wouldn't be that much lower than us. And looking at the way global warming and the like, a risk, I'm guessing, that parts of this, if the overall sea levels rose too much further, that we wouldn't be able to take this walk.
We would be in our kayak.
I know that's a very small consideration in the grand scheme of things, but sustainability,
So absolutely, and this is a wonderful backdrop, as you quite said. Unfortunately, given the cloud cover, you can't quite see the South Downs, and actually if you could see the South Downs, you'd be able to see Goodwood just up here to the right.
One of these days I'll work out how to use the zoom feature on this camera, but it's not today.
You might struggle with the zoom today, but so look, it's a beautiful setting, and of course sustainability is top of mind for many people, and rightly so. So for Salesforce, I suppose the angle here, again, where are we relevant and where can we be of assistance to forces? And that's really about giving people more visibility onto, the goals that they're trying to achieve with reducing carbon footprint. And let me just make, let's try and simplify that. How do you measure it? How do you know if you're making progress? And actually the tooling that we have is kind of custom built, pre-built applications that can connect to various data sources and then make meaningful sense of that. So again, what sources am I talking about? It may be things like facilities management data you have on offices. It may be energy bills. It may be water usage. It may be plugging into things like your fleet management system to understand how the cars are operating. So all that data we can pull into a single environment and then actually give
some sort of dashboard that provides data on how in these circumstances the force is doing.
And they'll measure those against their key performance indicators they have. You could even take that one stage further, which we're looking at with other agencies at the moment, which is when they are coming out to contract to buy new wares or whatever it might be, any assets that they're buying. How ethically are those companies working? What's their social value that they're adding? And we've seen a lot of that around commercial frameworks. So again, being able to measure what those suppliers are doing as well. It's not just about the force directly, but also the supply chain as well.
That's a fascinating area. I'm not aware, not just UK, but further afield as well, of any force that is making available a wealth of data on their environmental impact. Maybe there are. I'll have to go and look at that in a little more detail. So now we're coming towards the close of our recording of this conversation. We will have the delight of I think heading back, because if we head on, presumably there'll be a mouth of the river that we'll be unable to cross. But
we're in more danger of carrying on and hitting the pub fairly soon.
Oh, well,
that might be...
It's so we're recording this at what I imagine is by now about 11 a.m. So we'll have to be careful not to hit the pub too hard. But it's a bit of a tradition of mine on these policing friendship tours to ask the person whose company I'm enjoying about a charity or charities that is dear to them. And so the question to you, what charity would you, or charities would you like to mention as we're coming to the close of our conversation?
Yeah, and look, so the work we do with our volunteering, so Salesforce takes it very seriously and actually gives all of its members of staff 5 days a year to actually take as volunteering days. So we call it VTO, volunteering time off. And actually we, as a team that covers sort of defence, intelligence, policing, we've decided as a team we'll actually cover 2 areas. So one is actually going to be our work with the veterans, and we're doing some work with the Office of the Veteran Affairs at the moment, so we will continue to do some work there. And then secondly, I think an area that we've all really embraced a lot more, especially during the COVID times as well, is just around mental health and mental well-being. So we're going to do some work in the police sector around those aspects, probably with someone like Mind. And look, I think it's hugely relevant. You only have to look at recent cases and things that are happening to see that actually that's something we do need to continue to talk about and help people with. So
yes,
so 2 areas I think that are really topical for us is veterans and
Mind or similar as well mental health charities. Simon, it's been a great pleasure walking with you, and you're introducing me to a little of your backyard, if I can describe it as that. Yeah. I have never been to Chichester before. I've never been to this area before. It's a complete oversight on my part. Thank you so much. Been a real pleasure. And with that, we'll wrap the video.
Thank you.